Hi, I'm Lauren Ruskey, and I teach animal science at Caesar Rodney High School in Camden, Delaware. This is my 10th year teaching and my 9th in my current district. My idea for the 2021 NAAE Ideas Unlimited Award is called A Day in the Life of a Goat Vet. In this 4-day lesson, students investigate 10 common health issues that affect goats. Many of my students are non-traditional and have little to no experience around livestock, but are interested in pursuing a career in veterinary medicine one day. This lab gives them the hands-on experience while observing livestock in their environment in order to properly diagnose and treat common issues that goat producers deal with on a daily basis. At Caesar Rodney High School, we maintain a small herd of registered boar goats that we breed so that our students can participate in market goat projects at our state fair. Over the course of the year, our goats sometimes develop some health issues that have to be addressed in a timely manner. However, this doesn't usually happen during the part of my small ruminant unit where we are discussing goat health. Our department strives to maintain a healthy herd, so it's difficult to provide live examples of the diseases and disorders that we talk about in class. 2 years ago, I was looking for something to spruce up the health management portion of my small ruminant unit when I stumbled across a curriculum from Virginia Cooperative Extension on parasites in goats. The educator that developed this curriculum, Chantel Wilson, altered some stuffed goats so that youth could learn how to check FAMACHA scores of goats with varying parasite loads. I reached out to her for more information, but since it's a university publication, it had to go through the appropriate review process and wasn't quite ready to be distributed. So back to the drawing board I went. A few days later, I was scrolling through Instagram and I came across a post where a teacher had turned her classroom into a surgical theater in order to teach an anatomy lesson. Her students put on scrubs and medical coats, they had stethoscopes, they had goggles, the face masks, the whole 9 yards. She fully immersed her students in the experience of being in a surgical theater, and so I thought, I could totally do this in my small ruminant unit with goat health. It clicked. I had my idea. I would take the inspiration from the Virginia Cooperative Extension publication on the FAMACHA scores with the stuffed goats, and I would combine it with the idea that I saw from the anatomy teacher on Instagram into a veterinary experience for my students. I purchased some stuffed goats off Amazon. I altered them to present with the symptoms of the 10 health issues that we cover in class, and then I had my students dress up in scrubs and white coats to get the full experience of the vet visit that they were going to be conducting. Prior to the activity, students read through an article on the different diseases and disorders that goats face. They took notes on a graphic organizer about how the disease or disorder develops, what its symptoms are, how to treat it, and how to prevent it. Once they were done working in their groups to fill in their graphic organizer, we discussed as a class in order to clear up any misconceptions or errors that may have been there. And we also viewed some images of affected goats with these disorders. Lastly, we conducted the lab activity. Students were given a scenario where they were asked to complete 10 farm visits in order to help producers diagnose and treat their sick goats. They were allowed to work in pairs or by themselves in order to effectively observe, diagnose, and prescribe treatment for the goats. Then, prior to leaving their farm visit, they were asked to provide some counseling to the producer on how to prevent the disorder in the future. Since my school was hybrid this year, I had to figure out a way to convert this in-person activity to one that could be done virtually as well. To do so, I set the lab up a day in advance, recorded a video of each goat, being sure to show the pen, the feed, the temperature of the goat, and any physical symptoms presented by the goat. I then created a Google Slides document where my totally remote students could conduct telemedicine visits by watching the videos and sharing their findings for each disorder on the slide. While my remote students didn't get the full experience of the white coat and physically handling the goat, they were still able to utilize a telemedicine type activity to conduct their visits. The idea of this lesson could very easily be adapted to any area of agricultural education. Obviously, the goats could be replaced by other animals for animal science, but I think you could do the same thing with plant diseases, insect identification, and maybe even welding issues. I think a really cool thing would be to doctor up some plants in your greenhouse with some common greenhouse management issues. Turn the kids loose, have them identify and diagnose the issues at hand, and then they should have to develop a management plan for the greenhouse. The same thing could be done for crops. They could identify weeds, insects, and plant diseases present in the field, what causes those issues, how to treat them, and how to prevent them in the future. This could then pair very well with a guest visit from an agronomist at the end of the lesson. And that's something I think I would add to my lesson the next time I do it. I think it would be really cool to bring in a small ruminant specialist from our cooperative extension, maybe a goat producer or a veterinarian, to speak to my students about what the importance of being able to identify and diagnose common diseases is in the real world, and just to kind of add that industry and career piece to my lesson. The big takeaway, I think, is that creating an experience where students are immersed in the content really helps our content to stick. A lot of my students don't feel comfortable around livestock because they don't come from an ag background. So to expect them to jump in a pen with a goat in order to conduct an exam is something that I think I'd get a lot of pushback on. In addition to teaching my content, I also have to teach barn sense. Things like closing the gate after you enter or exit, opening the gate inward instead of outward, checking water and feed buckets every time you go into the barn, being aware of flight zones, all of those things I have to teach to my students because they don't come to me with that knowledge. To have each student conduct an exam on our goats would take way longer than what I have time for during a school year. Instead, I used stuffed animals that were non-threatening and allowed my students to explore the content in a way that made them feel safe, both physically and academically. We walked through how to conduct an exam, how to handle the stuffed animals, and then for extra credit, students that wanted to were given the opportunity to go conduct an exam on one of our live goats based on what they learned in this activity. By creating an experience where they felt safe enough to take a risk with my content, I created an opportunity for them to grow and to be willing to take bigger risks because they knew they would be supported throughout the whole process.
I liked how this activity was very hands-on in that you would have to look for the particular symptoms that the goat was suffering from, and using those you would be able to identify the illness that the goat was suffering. And what's better is that in a paper assignment you would have to read the lists of what the goat was suffering from, but in this you get to actually look for them and try to identify them for yourself. And if you couldn't identify all the symptoms, you could consult with your fellow veterinarians to help you identify the symptoms and then the diseases. So overall, this was probably one of my favorite activities of this school year.
I really enjoyed watching Lauren teach the Goat Lab for a variety of reasons. I thought it was an extremely creative way to present some information that had the potential to be overwhelming. Using the safe space of a classroom, using familiar materials like stuffed animals, shavings, pom-pom balls, kind of gave kids the opportunity to kind of take a risk before the kids actually went into the barn and saw the things in real life with the goats that we house here in the building. The other thing that I thought really brought an element of creativity to this lesson was kids enjoy being creative, and I think the idea of the gloves, the lab coats, the goggles, recognizing the fact that when you are treating an animal for a variety of diseases, you have a patient that can't speak, so you have to use all of your senses to be able to diagnose a problem and being able to apply that information in a real world scenario.
When I found out that we were going to be hybrid this year, I immediately thought of this activity. This activity is probably my favorite activity to do all year. I look forward to it, my students look forward to it. I kind of pump them up at the beginning of the year and kind of build some anticipation about this activity. And so when I found out about hybrid or possibly even remote instruction due to COVID, I was kind of bummed that we weren't going to be able to do this activity. But I quickly adapted it to be able to reach all of my students, regardless of whether they were going to be in my classroom or at home. And I really think that this activity is something that can be easily adapted to any content area in agri-science, regardless of what you teach and what grade level you teach. As long as we're creating experiences for our kids in the classroom, our content is going to stick. We are going to provide them with relevant experiences to real world concepts that they're not going to get in any other classroom or other setting that they may be involved in. Thank you so much for listening to my idea for the 2021 NAAE Ideas Unlimited Award.